NBA analysts over at Bleacher Report have predicted that the Toronto Raptors are going to sign an athletic 3-and-D wing from the Chicago Bulls during this offseason. So we're going to break down what they had to say, whether or not it makes sense to the Toronto Raptors, and whether or not this is a legitimate possibility. Because stealing away Patrick Williams from the Chicago Bulls, a 22-year-old guy with a ton of potential in this NBA, could be a massive pickup for this Raptors group, and NBA analysts are predicting it over there at Bleacher Report, so we're going to dive straight into it. Basically, reporters come out that making offseason predictions across the NBA, and they had Patrick Williams going to the Toronto Raptors. Now, who the heck is Patrick Williams? Because he's a guy that was a lottery pick, had a ton of potential with the Chicago Bulls, but a combination of injuries, just the Bulls being an extremely weird team in the NBA, has led to him fall out of the limelight, despite the Chicago Bulls being a big market. Well, basically, and you can see it's the top 10 NBA free agency predictions. Patrick Williams going to the Toronto Raptors. I pulled those up in the wrong order. But basically, Patrick Williams is 22 years old. He's 6'7", 215, extremely athletic, averaged 10 points per game for the Chicago Bulls last year, 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, shot 44% from the field, and 40% from behind the three-point line. And that's huge, but also on the defensive end, is a dude that can really sort of clamp down. Now, but box score wise, about a steal and a block per night, nothing too crazy there, but is mobile, especially when healthy. And this is the big thing with Patrick Williams, because despite the fact he's a solid athlete, he's quick on the wing, he has that frame as we saw, 6'7", 210, can play the 3, 4, really the 2 as well, but is naturally a power forward for the Bulls. They've been playing pretty small over the course of his Chicago Bulls career, but Patrick Williams is a guy that could come in and kind of exactly slot in to what the Toronto Raptors are doing, how we're constructing our roster. Because the big thing that the Raptors need is shooting. To build around a guy like Scotty Barnes, as well as an RJ Barrett, who aren't naturally the most knockdown three-point shooting monsters of the NBA, having as much floor spacing around them as possible is key, because their games are maximized when they're spacing, so they can slash, they can drive, they can facilitate, they can do all these types of things. And Williams can do that. He can floor space, play that 4 spot, while also not giving up much on the defensive end. And the shooting, we can look at it, right, in terms of what he's able to provide from the corners. He's been an elite corner three-point shooter over the course of his career. This season, shot 42% from the corners. A couple of years ago, he was shooting 50%. Again, smaller sample size. We can see the games played, but it takes a lot of a lot of them are assist upon. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, but he gets some dunks, he gets some threes, he can knock down shots from all over the basketball court. So if the Toronto Raptors were to throw out some money in this year's free agency period, a guy that is an elite 3-and-D sort of knockdown shooter that fits the Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley timeline, I think that makes complete sense. So how realistic is this for the Toronto Raptors to come out here and be able to pick up Patrick Williams, steal him away from the Chicago Bulls? Well, the guy is a restricted free agent this offseason. So what does that mean? Well, Patrick Williams is a guy the Raptors can offer him whatever contract they want. They could give him X amount of money, but the Chicago Bulls have the option to essentially match whatever deal the Toronto Raptors throw at him. So if the Raptors offered him, a $20 million per year contract, and the Chicago Bulls said, hey, we want to keep him at that price, the Chicago Bulls can essentially steal away that contract, even if Patrick Williams signed with the Toronto Raptors, and bring him back to Chicago. So I think despite the fact he's dealt with some injuries, despite the fact his numbers haven't been that overwhelming, only 10 points per game, I still think the Chicago Bulls are going to be interested in keeping him around. Where the Raptors could potentially slide in, could potentially jump into the mix, is whether or not the Chicago Bulls actually have the amount of money to keep him. Because looking at the Chicago Bulls' current payroll, they are not as flexible as the Toronto Raptors right now. They have Zach LaVine's contract, which is probably one of the worst contracts in the NBA here now at this point, given Zach LaVine's injuries. One of the more untradeable deals out there on the open market. And they have a few guys locked in. They picked up Lonzo Ball's option, so he's going to be locked in for the next couple years. They have Nikola Vucevic, who they've recently signed to an extension. Kobe White's under contract for a decent amount of years. And they have a few guys that just have not big money deals, but players that sort of have significant contracts on their books, right? Caruso, $9 million. DeSumo, $7 million. $4.5 million for Javon Carter. There's players that are under contract. It's not like they have a ton of flexibility this offseason, but the big thing that they have to decide upon and figure out this offseason is what they're going to do with DeMar DeRozan. He's an unrestricted free agent, and by all indications or reports, it seems like he wants to go back there, and the Chicago Bulls want him back on that team. They don't want the asset to walk for nothing, but DeMar DeRozan gets brought back, especially with the rising cap rates, and probably, on a shorter term deal, he's going to be getting paid $30-40 million. I wouldn't be shocked at that, per season annually. So if you're adding that to those books as well, and Patrick Williams, a guy that's 22 years old, elite 3-and-D player in the NBA with a ton of potential, I mean, you're probably going to have to pay him upwards of $20 million. And that's probably a low end in terms of salary expectation. So if you're paying DeMar, you're paying Zach LaVine, you're paying Nikola Vucevic, you're paying all of these dudes on this team, do they have enough cash? Do they have that enough money to essentially bring all of those guys back? And they might value DeMar, especially with the injury history, to Patrick Williams as the asset that they might be able to sort of flip, figure something out with. The Bulls don't seem like they want to be an organization that tanks. So moving in that younger direction with Patrick Williams with all the injury concerns is essentially why Bleacher Report predicted that another team would be able to slide in, give him an offer that the Chicago Bulls just wouldn't be able to match. And the Toronto Raptors are on the opposite end of what the Chicago Bulls are currently at with right now, because we have a lot of money coming off the books this offseason and don't have a ton of committed capital going forward. Scotty Barnes is still in his rookie contract. RJ Barrett's our only guaranteed significant contract moving forward, and even then, that's under $30 million per year, so that's a pretty reasonable contract. IQ is going to be the big restricted free agent we have this offseason, who's going to get paid probably $30 million per year as well this offseason. But other than that, we don't have a ton of money we're tied down and locked into. So what does this lead to? What does this lead to the Toronto Raptors decision making? Because I think if we offered probably not $20 million, but $25 million per year for Patrick Williams, this deal could get done. And while that might be a bit of an overpay, why that might be, a lot looking at a guy that averaged 10 points per game, he just really reminds me of kind of a Jalen Johnson-esque player for the Atlanta Hawks last season. A guy that has shown spurts of amazing potential, but due to external factors, positioning stuff, injuries, just hasn't really been able to put it all together. And then Jalen Johnson's a guy that ended up breaking out last season for the Atlanta Hawks. Ironically, the Raptors were linked to him last offseason with the Pascal Siakam drama, him going to the Atlanta Hawks. But basically, Patrick Williams is a guy that I think coming in, especially where the Raptors desperately need a sort of starting power forward, if we don't want to move Scotty up to that slot, I think it could be a really awesome fit. He fits the timeline, but if we're given that money there, then other decisions have to be made, because Gary Trent Jr. is also a free agent this offseason. So that money, I don't think Masai Ujiri will want to get locked into a bunch of multi-year extensions to dudes that are a little bit unproven. So you might be deciding between Gary Trent Jr. and Patrick Williams out there at that point. And frankly, just positioning wise, especially where we have Grady Dick, and we'll see how the NBA draft plays out, Patrick Williams seems like a guy that's a bit more of a fit offensively and defensively for this Raptors group going forward. Bruce Brown's also an interesting scenario we have to deal with in terms of whether or not we give him his team option next year for $20 million. But basically, I think Patrick Williams would be a cool pickup, even with the injury concerns, fits the timeline, and could potentially blossom for this Raptors group. But again, would be a little bit of a risk, but the Toronto Raptors are at right now, it's not a bad idea to take flyers on younger dudes to see how their sort of careers could potentially blossom with the Toronto Raptors. But let me know what you guys think about this potential pickup in the comment section down below. You guys have the best friend, as far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. I'm signing out. Cheers.